The battlefield was burning. Smoke rose high into the dark sky, and broken ships lay scattered like dead animals. The war between humans and the alien empire had raged for years, but tonight the fight was different. Tonight, she was here. She was not like the other aliens. Her name was whispered with fear, a silent warning among soldiers. They called her the Venom Bearer. Her beauty was sharp like a blade, and her presence was deadly. No one who touched her lived to tell the tale. Her poison was her weapon, and her weapon had never failed. In the middle of the chaos, a group of human soldiers fought back with courage. They were outnumbered, but they refused to run. Among them stood one man, tall and strong, but not famous, not a leader. Just another soldier fighting to survive. His eyes were steady, his steps unshaken. She saw him and smiled, a dangerous, cruel smile. With graceful steps, she moved through fire and smoke. Her enemies fell one by one, poisoned by her touch. No blade could stop her, no bullet could slow her down. And then she reached him. The human soldier lifted his weapon, but she was faster. Her hand struck like lightning, sharp nails sinking into his skin. A burning fire spread through his veins. He staggered, the poison rushing inside him like liquid death. Her smile widened, sure of her victory. For her, this was always the end, always the same. But then something strange happened. He did not fall. He did not beg for life or cry for mercy. His eyes met hers, and even as his body trembled, his legs did not break. The fire of poison should have killed him in seconds. Yet he stood tall, like a mountain refusing to move. She frowned, confused. No one had ever lasted this long. The poison she carried was born from generations of her people. It was strong enough to kill giants, strong enough to melt stone. But this human, this ordinary soldier was still alive. The battlefield noise faded in her mind. She stared at him as if the world had stopped. Her heart, cold and trained for killing, skipped for the first time. Why was he still standing? Why was he not dead? The soldier's breathing was heavy. His veins burned with fire. Every second felt like a blade cutting inside his body. But his spirit, the thing that no poison could reach, held him up. He tightened his grip on his weapon, even though his hand shook. And with a broken voice, he whispered, "I will not fall." Her eyes widened. It was not his strength that shocked her. It was his will. There was no fear in his gaze, only defiance. She had seen warriors, kings, generals, all fall before her poison. But this human, nameless and forgotten in the chaos of war, was different. Around them, the battle still roared. The clash of steel, the cries of the dying, the fire burning the sky. But between the two of them, a silence grew, heavy and sharp. Her hand trembled slightly, an emotion she had never felt. She told herself it was impossible that he would die soon. And yet, a small voice whispered in her mind, what if he did not? She stepped back, her eyes locked on his shaking form. He should collapse any moment, his heart should stop, his body should fall. But he raised his head higher, standing in the fire like a figure carved from stone. Even in pain, he looked unbroken. For the first time in her life, the Venom Bearer felt something strange. Not victory, not hunger for blood, but curiosity. She wanted to see how long he could last. She wanted to know if a human could truly resist the death that flowed in her veins. The battle raged on, but for her, nothing else mattered now. She had found something rare, something impossible, a human who would not fall. And as she watched him fight against death itself, a dangerous thought entered her mind. Maybe her greatest weapon had finally met its match. The night after the battle was heavy with silence. The smoke of burning ships drifted across the broken ground, and the stars above were hidden by black clouds. The Venom Bearer stood alone on a ruined hill, her sharp eyes fixed on the human soldier she had poisoned. He should have been dead long ago. His body should have been nothing more than another lifeless shape among the fallen. Yet he lived. His breathing was uneven, his steps unsteady, but his spirit was strong. She had bound him in chains made of her people's metal, leaving him inside a ruined shelter. She told herself it was for study, for answers, but deep inside she knew it was more. She could not let go of the strange pull that kept her eyes on him. Something about this man was different, something she needed to understand. The soldier lay against the cold stone, sweat dripping down his face. Every vein burned like fire. Every heartbeat was a battle. But his eyes were open, defiant, watching her every move. He was no general, no hero known to history, yet his will was sharper than any blade. She had killed kings who begged for life, warriors who screamed in fear. But this human whispered nothing, asked for nothing, and gave her only silence and resistance. Hours passed, and still his body fought the poison. She circled him like a hunter watching prey, but the more she looked, the more she doubted. This was not prey, this was not weakness, this was something else. When she leaned closer, expecting to see fear in his gaze, she saw fire. It was not the fire of pain, but the fire of a soul that refused to surrender. Her mind, trained for war, whispered that she should finish him now, and the mystery before it grew dangerous. One strike of her venom would silence his spirit forever, and yet her hand did not move. Instead, she found herself asking a question, her voice colder than the steel around him. Why do you stand, human, when death lives inside you? The soldier's lips moved, slow and cracked from thirst. Because falling means losing, he whispered, his voice rough but unbroken. Because as long as I breathe, I fight. His words sank into her like blades sharper than her own claws. It made no sense. No creature should resist her venom, and no heart should fight against such pain. But this human was not only resisting with flesh, he was resisting with spirit. It was his will, not his body, that held him up. She stepped back, unsettled. Her empire had always said humans were weak, fragile, too easy to break. But now she saw something dangerous, something her people had never understood. Humans did not win through power, they won through endurance, through a refusal to fall even when death pressed close. The venom bearer's thoughts grew louder. If one human could resist, then perhaps others could too. Perhaps her greatest weapon was not unbreakable after all. The idea filled her with unease, but also with curiosity. For the first time in her long life, she wanted to learn, not kill. She asked him again, her voice sharp, "What makes you strong? What burns inside you that even my venom cannot kill?" His answer was slow, but it carried weight. "It is not strength," he said, his head lifting though his body shook. "It is the will to protect, the will to fight for something greater than myself." Her chest tightened, though she did not understand why. These words were simple, yet they carried more power than poison. She could not deny what she saw, a man broken in body, but unbroken in spirit. And in that moment, she realized his secret. The true power of the human was not his blood, but his will. Outside, the night grew darker, but inside that ruined shelter, a new spark was born. A bond neither of them wanted, but neither could ignore. She looked at him not as prey, not as an experiment, but as something else, something that could change the war itself. And though she told herself she hated him, though she reminded herself he was her enemy, her eyes did not leave his. Her heart whispered words she could not silence. This human is not meant to fall. The days after the battle passed slowly. The human soldier remained chained inside the ruined shelter, his body trembling, but his spirit unbroken. The venom bearer watched him like a hunter watches prey, yet she could not strike the final blow. Her commanders had ordered her to kill all humans without hesitation, but for the first time, she disobeyed. At night, she walked the battlefield alone, her mind heavy. She remembered the faces of kings who had begged for mercy, the screams of warriors who had fallen with her poison burning in their veins. But this soldier was different. He did not beg. He did not scream. He stood, and in his silence, he carved a wound into her certainty. The human's name was Daniel. She learned it when another soldier whispered it before dying. She spoke it to herself in the shadows, tasting the strange sound of human language. Daniel, the man who refused to fall. She hated the way the name lingered in her thoughts. One evening, as the wind howled across the broken land, Daniel looked at her with steady eyes. His body was weak, but his voice still carried strength. "Why did you keep me alive?" he asked, his words slow but sharp. She turned away, unwilling to show her confusion. "I want to see how long you last," she answered coldly. But inside, she knew the truth was more dangerous. Each day she brought him water, just enough to survive. Each night she returned, watching him fight against the fire in his veins. It should have been simple, a study of endurance, but something began to change. She found herself listening when he spoke. He told her stories of Earth, of skies blue like oceans, of families waiting for soldiers who never returned. His words painted worlds she had never seen, worlds without poison, without endless war. She told herself she did not care, yet she listened. She told herself his voice meant nothing, yet echoed in her mind when she closed her eyes. Her people had raised her to believe humans were weak, fragile, unworthy of survival. But every time Daniel's eyes met hers, she saw strength that no poison could touch. Her commanders grew suspicious. They asked why the humans still breathed, why her venom had not silenced him. She lied, saying the poison worked slowly, saying she wanted him to suffer longer. But in her heart, she knew she was protecting him, protecting an enemy. Daniel began to notice too. One night, when the stars broke through the smoke-filled sky, he whispered, "You could have killed me many times, but you didn't. Why?" She froze, her claws tightening around the chains. For a moment, her heart spoke before her mind could stop it. "Because I want to understand you." Silence filled the air, heavy and sharp. Daniel's gaze softened, and for the first time since the battle, a faint smile touched his lips. "You're not as cold as you pretend to be," he said. The words struck her deeper than any blade. She wanted to deny it, to remind him that she was his enemy. But the truth burned inside her. She was changing. The bond between them grew dangerous. He was her prisoner, yet his will bound her more tightly than his chains bound him. She began to fear not for him, but for herself. Her people would call it betrayal. Her commanders would call it weakness. But she could no longer see Daniel as just an enemy. Every glance, every word, pulled her further from the path of loyalty. She told herself it was curiosity, but the truth was far stronger. She admired him, respected him, and somewhere deep within, something even greater began to stir. The venom bearer, once feared for her poison, now feared her own heart, because the most dangerous bond of all was not forged by chains or venom. It was forged by trust, fragile and forbidden. And in the silence between them, that bond was growing stronger every day. The Empire was restless. Rumors spread through the alien ranks like wildfire. Whispers that the venom bearer, their perfect weapon, had failed to finish a human soldier. Some believed she was testing a new method. Others whispered that she had grown weak. But the truth was far more dangerous than any rumor. Her commanders summoned her, their voices sharp with suspicion. They asked why Daniel still breathed, why her poison had not ended him. Her answers were cold and practiced. "The venom is slow in his body," she said. "I want to watch it destroy him piece by piece." The words satisfied them for now, but their eyes lingered on her longer than before. They sensed something, a crack in her loyalty. Back in the ruined shelter, Daniel felt the tension growing. He saw the shadows in her eyes, the way she hesitated before speaking. He knew her people would not forgive hesitation. One evening, as the cold wind swept across the battlefield, he asked softly, "They doubt you, don't they?" She turned away, but the silence in her voice answered for her. Her people did not wait long. One night she received her final test. Before the Council of Warlords, they brought Daniel in chains. His face pale, his body weakened, but his spirit still burning. They ordered her to finish it, to strike him again, to prove her loyalty. The poison bearer must never hesitate, Never falter, never fail. Her claws trembled as she stepped forward. Daniel stood tall despite the weight of his chains. His eyes met hers, calm and unbroken. There was no fear in him, only silent trust. In that moment, she felt the weight of two worlds pressing against her heart. Her empire demanded death, but her soul whispered another truth. She raised her hand, venom burning at her fingertips. The warlords watched with hungry eyes, ready to punish weakness. Daniel closed his eyes, but not in surrender. It was trust, pure and dangerous, trust placed in the one who was meant to kill him. Her breath caught. She could feel her empire's gaze, and yet she could not strike. The silence stretched until the warlords grew impatient. "Do it," they commanded. "Prove your strength." Her claws dug in her own palm, poison dripping like liquid fire. Her heart screamed, torn between duty and something she could not name. Finally, with a cry sharp as steel, she struck. The venom flowed into Daniel's body once more. Gasps filled the hall, soldiers leaning forward to see him collapse. But once again, the impossible happened. His body trembled, his veins burned, yet he stood. Every breath was agony, but his eyes never fell. He whispered through clenched teeth, "I will not fall." The warlords murmured in shock. Their perfect weapon had failed again. Some looked at her with suspicion, others with fear. Perhaps the poison was weakening. Perhaps humans were stronger than they thought. But she knew the truth. It was not her venom that was weak. It was his spirit that was stronger than death. The council dismissed her with warnings and sharp stares. She led Daniel back to the shelter, her heart a storm. Every step she asked herself the same question. Why had she struck with hesitation? Why did she feel pain when he trembled under her touch? Why did his eyes, filled with fire, haunt her even now? That night she stood outside the shelter, the cold air biting against her skin. Her thoughts swirled like shadows. If her people learned the truth, that she had begun to protect him, they would destroy her. But if she let them take him, if she watched him fall, something inside her would die too. Daniel, chained but unbroken, whispered through the night, "You are not their weapon anymore." She froze, the words cutting deep. She wanted to deny it, to tell him he was wrong. But her silence betrayed her, because in her heart she knew the breaking point had come, and her choice would decide not only his fate, but her own. The night after the council was colder than any before. The venom bearer stood outside the ruined shelter, her eyes fixed on the stars hidden by smoke. Her people had begun to doubt her, their whispers sharper than blades. If they discovered her true hesitation, she would not only lose her honor, she would lose her life. Inside the shelter, Daniel breathed slowly, his body still burning from the second strike of her poison. His chains rattled whenever he shifted, but even in weakness he carried the same fire. He looked at her when she entered, his voice quiet but steady. "You saved me in your own way," he said. She stiffened, pretending not to understand. "I struck you. My venom is inside you," she replied coldly. But deep in her heart, she knew he was right. She had struck without full intent. She had allowed him to endure again. As the hours passed, something unspoken grew between them. Not friendship, not love, but something fragile and dangerous. Trust. It was a bond she was never meant to share with an enemy. And yet, in the silence of the night, it wrapped around them like invisible chains stronger than steel. One evening, when the guards changed their watch, Daniel whispered, "They will come for you too, won't they?" She froze, her claws tightening against the stone wall. "They will not forgive hesitation," she admitted at last, her voice low. Daniel's eyes softened, filled with a strange kind of pity. "You're no longer their weapon. You're their prisoner too." The words struck her deeper than her own venom. For the first time she realized he was right. She was bound not by chains of metal, but by the expectations of her empire. Every command, every strike, every kill had been a prison she never saw. And now, with Daniel's fire burning before her, those walls began to crumble. The next night, assassins came. Her own people, cloaked in shadows, entered the ruins, their orders clear. They had seen her hesitation, heard the whispers, and now they came to erase her failure. Daniel woke first, hearing the faint scrape of boots against stone. Before she could move, blades glimmered in the dark. But she was faster. Her venom struck like lightning, her enemies collapsing one by one. Yet even as she fought, her heart shook. She was killing her own kind. The line had been crossed, and there would be no return. When the last assassin fell, Daniel's chains were wet with their blood. He looked at her, his voice low but certain. "You chose," he said. She said nothing, her claws trembling, her chest heavy. But she knew he was right again. From that moment, they were fugitives. The Empire would hunt them both, her for betrayal, him for defiance. They could no longer stay in the ruins. Together, they moved through the shadows of broken cities and silent fields of ash. She led him carefully, striking down patrols, feeding him just enough strength to survive. And in return, he gave her something she had never known: trust without fear. One night, as they hid inside the shell of a fallen ship, Daniel spoke again. "You had the power to end me, but you didn't." She turned, her face hidden in the shadows. "I wanted to understand you," she admitted, her voice sharper than she intended. "And now?" Daniel asked, his eyes steady. Her silence was her answer. The bond between them grew stronger in the dark. Every battle, every step, wove their fates tighter together. She had once been the Empire's deadliest weapon. But now, walking beside a human she was meant to kill, she found something far more dangerous than poison. She found a reason. Trust in the shadows was fragile, but it was also powerful. And as she walked beside Daniel, hunted by her own people, she realized that this fragile bond might one day change the course of the war itself. The Empire did not forgive betrayal. From the highest towers of their war council came a command that echoed through every outpost. The venom bearer had turned against them, and she was to be hunted without mercy. Her crime was unforgivable, not only sparing a human, but killing her own kind to protect him. The news spread like fire. Every soldier, every assassin, every blade of the Empire now had her name marked in blood. She and Daniel moved through ruins and shadows, their steps silent, but their hearts heavy. The chase was relentless, and each night they could feel the hunters drawing closer. Daniel's strength was returning slowly, but the venom inside him still burned. He fought against it with every breath, refusing to surrender. She knew he would never admit weakness, yet she could see the pain in his eyes when the fire struck his veins. And still, he walked beside her, never asking to be left behind, never asking for mercy. One evening, as they hid in the shell of a broken fortress, he asked her, "What happens if they catch us?" She looked into the distance, her voice sharp but heavy. "They will kill me," she said, "and they will use you as proof that humans can be broken." Daniel shook his head, his fire unshaken. "They cannot break me," he said firmly, "not while I stand." The words struck her deeper than poison. For so long she had believed strength came from power, from fear, from venom. But Daniel's strength came from something invisible, something she could not touch or destroy. And now, she realized his strength was becoming hers too. The final trial came sooner than she expected. At dawn, the sky lit with the fire of enemy ships. Dozens of warriors descended, led by one of the warlords who had once trusted her. He was taller than any human, armored in steel and carrying blades dripping with venom stronger than hers. "You are no longer one of us," he declared, his voice echoing across the ruins. "You chose a human over your empire. Now you will die with him." The venom bearer stood between Daniel and the warlord, her claws sharp, her eyes burning. Daniel tried to step forward, but the chains of exhaustion still clung to him. "This is my fight," she told him, her voice trembling not with fear, but with resolve. He shook his head, refusing to step back. "No," he said, "this is our fight." The battle began like thunder. Blades clashed, venom burned, the ground shook beneath their fury. The warlord struck with power enough to crush stone, but she moved with speed born of desperation. Every strike she gave was fueled not by loyalty to an empire, but by something far stronger, her choice to protect. Daniel, though weakened, refused to stand aside. He picked up a fallen weapon and fought at her side, each swing a promise that he would not fall. Together they moved like storm and fire, her venom striking from the shadows, his will cutting through the air. They were enemies by birth, yet in that moment they were bound by something greater than blood. The warlord roared, his blade cutting deep into her shoulder, venom spilling into her own flesh. Pain seared her body, but she refused to fall. Daniel's voice rang through the chaos. "Stand with me," he shouted, his fire reaching her soul. And with that cry, she rose again, striking with the last of her strength. Her claws pierced the warlord's armor, venom flowing into him like a river of death. He staggered, his eyes wide with disbelief. "No weapon of ours should turn against us," he gasped before collapsing into the dust. Silence fell, broken only by Daniel's ragged breathing. She looked at him, her body trembling, her heart burning with more than poison. She had crossed the final line. She was no longer a weapon of the Empire, no longer their venom bearer. She was something new, something her people would fear even more. Together they stood among the ruins, broken but unbroken. The hunters would come again. The war was far from over. But in this trial, they had proven something the Empire could not deny, that even poison could not kill the human spirit, and that together they were more dangerous than any empire could imagine. The battlefield was quiet after the warlord fell. The ruins around them glowed with the last embers of fire, and the smoke curled into the fading sky. The venom bearer stood wounded, her body trembling from the venom she had spilled into her own veins. Daniel stood beside her, scarred and weary, but still upright, still unbroken. For a long moment neither spoke. The silence between them carried more weight than words. She had turned against her empire, she had killed her own commander, and now there was no path back. Daniel looked at her with steady eyes, and in that gaze she saw no fear, no hatred, only the fire that had kept him alive through her poison. "You will be hunted forever," she whispered, her voice low and rough. "They will never stop until we are both gone." Daniel smiled faintly, his lips cracked but his spirit bright. "Then let them come," he said, "because I will not fall." His words struck deeper than any blade. They carried the truth she had tried to deny. Strength was not in venom or in power. Strength lived in the will to endure. She had seen it in him from the first moment, when her poison failed to bring him down. And now, standing beside him, she felt that strength inside herself too. Together they walked from the ruins, every step heavy but unbroken. Her people would name her traitor, his people might call her enemy. But between them, a new bond had been forged, not by chains, not by orders, but by choice. She had chosen to protect him, and he had chosen to trust her. And in that choice, they had found something greater than survival. As they moved through the wasteland, Daniel spoke of the future, of a world where humans and aliens did not fight, but stood together. His words were simple, yet they painted images in her mind stronger than any empire's vision. A world not built on poison and fear, but on endurance and trust. It sounded impossible, yet so had his survival. She listened, though she said little. Her heart was torn between doubt and hope. Could such a future truly exist? Could she be more than a weapon? And yet, every time her eyes met his, she believed, if only for a moment, that it could. The days that followed tested them both. Hunters tracked their path, storms tore across the land, and food was scarce. But no matter how harsh the trials, Daniel never bent, never fell. Even when pain carved into his body, even when exhaustion dragged him down, he stood. His strength was not in muscle or in speed, it was in the fire of his spirit. And slowly, she realized that fire was guiding her too. One night, as they sat by the dim light of a dying fire, she asked softly, "Why do you keep fighting when everything is against you?" Daniel looked at her, his eyes glowing in the shadows. "Because falling means letting them win," he said, "and I was not born to fall." The words echoed in her heart, louder than any command she had ever followed. For so long she had lived as a weapon, her life defined by orders and death. But beside this human, she had learned something new, that strength was not in ending life, but in refusing to surrender to despair. That true power was not venom, but will. When dawn broke, they walked on, leaving behind the ashes of the warlord and the chains of the past. They did not know what waited ahead. More battles, more betrayal, perhaps even death. But they walked together, their steps steady, their bond unbroken. And in the silence of the rising sun, the venom-bearer understood the truth. The human beside her was no ordinary man. He was living proof that spirit was stronger than poison, that even in the face of death, willpower could stand unshaken. And as she followed his path into the unknown, she whispered words only the wind could hear. "He will not fall.